check that out. It was with my guest, Paper Thin. For this episode of the Tasteless podcast, I am interviewing Jake Umpleby, also known by his professional gamer ID, NoRegreT. He is a Grandmaster Starcraft 2 player and participant in the GSL Code S. We talk about a lot of cool stuff, including life in Korea, being a professional gamer, the future of RTS, and other stuff like that. Before this episode starts, I want to encourage you to go and support us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/tastelesspodcast. We cannot make shows like this without support from viewers like you, so really it is appreciated. And that does it for the plugging. Now on to episode 2, an interview with NoRegreT. Happy birthday, buddy.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. How old are you now?
I'm 23 years old.
23 years old. How long have you been in Korea for now?
I came here when I was maybe 20. So this is about my third year. I came in April, so.
Is it weird to be 23? I feel like there's certain years that you hit that it feels really fucking weird. Like, I had that when I turned, I guess 21 was a weird one. I'm like, okay, I guess
You can drink?
I can drink, but also, I guess I'm not a kid anymore or something like that.
Right.
30 was another really weird one for me, where I thought somehow I was going to change. I don't know how.
Right, like an arbitrary change.
Yeah, some
like
kind of weird
butterfly. You're going, like you're a cocoon into a butterfly.
Yeah,
like
and I'm actually not really that different at all. So yeah, what is it like to be 23 now?
I mean, personally, it doesn't feel any different, but I do feel like time is passing me. Like I'm getting older. I used to make like the excuse, well, like I'd probably be graduating university around now, kind of thing. But it's getting further and further away.
Did you ever actually go to university? No. Did you finish high school?
Yeah, I did.
And you went straight from high school to here?
Straight from high school to Korea, basically.
Damn, man. So wait, how old were you when you got here then? 20?
I was a little bit younger. I think I was like 19.
Okay.
But it's been a while.
So does it feel weird, like every year that passes that you're out here? Do you have this moment where you say, okay, I've been here for another year?
No. I feel like I could just be like, I'm going to be here indefinitely almost. At least now. I know it's kind of naive at my age because obviously like my whole life's in front of me, but I just feel organically like if I'm out of Korea, I'm out of Korea. If I'm here, I'm here. I kind of want to. I don't really have any time set on like when I should be out or when I should have a career or when I should do this. It's just kind of flowing right now. But I do feel as I get older, it becomes more apparent that will happen eventually. You know what I mean?
Right. So, actually, I'm a little bit spotty on what exactly was your origin story when you came out here, because now you run the team house.
Right.
I think at times you've had what's the most number of people you've had in the team house now?
Well, the max capacity is like 10, and we don't go past that.
So you have this giant apartment out here in Seoul.
Right.
You're busing gamers in and out of the country.
Indeed.
And you're 23 years old. How the fuck did you get here? This is such a bizarre story.
I guess originally I lived in the U.S. kind of with I was on a team that had a team house in the U.S. and I stayed there, and for whatever reason I wasn't allowed back in the country. Like.
What?
It was super weird. So like I left. I was only 4 months into my 6 month because I'm a Canadian. I could stay there for 6.
Okay, so
they thought.
Just to make it clear for the viewers. So basically, you can as a Canadian,
you can stay there for 6 months.
You can stay there for 6 months,
right,
as long as you're not like I guess technically working.
Exactly.
And then you have to fly back out.
Yeah. So I left 4 months in for Christmas or something because it's actually so cheap to fly from like it was Virginia to Toronto.
Okay.
It was like an hour flight or whatever. It was like $50, $100. I'm like, okay, I'll fly back. I don't care. So I leave and then I get back. I try to get back in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks later. And they're basically like, hey, you need to prove that you're not immigrating to the U.S. right now. I'm like, okay, how do I do this? I'm like 18, by the way. And they're like, okay, so you need a deed to a house, A. B, you need full employment with stubs. Or C, you need to be enrolled into university. And I'm like, well, I'm a pro gamer. So throw half of that out.
Yeah.
I live with my mom, obviously. Yeah. I don't know who has a house deed at 18.
Want my deed? Oh, it's right here, sir.
Like, I'm like incredibly like shocked that they even need this kind of stuff. So I'm like, obviously I can't prove this. And they're like, well, you can't come in. I'm like, okay, well, that's great. So I wasn't like denied entry. They just call it a withdrawal of application or whatever. Doesn't go on my record in any way. I can fly there freely now. It was just like this really fucked up thing where I like threw a wrench in my plan of, practicing. It's actually really hard to practice at home if anyone knows as a pro gamer.
No, you need to be around people for sure. I always find even just going back to, I mean, obviously I'm an American. Even for me to get back into the country can actually be a headache sometimes.
Yeah. They're just like, they don't want you. You just go back to Korea. Like, I don't understand. Are you gonna
it's weird
deport me?
because I'm sitting there going, well, you got to let me in, right?
Like, yeah, you're American.
Yeah, I had this one time. I was in the LA airport, and I got pulled over to be asked extra questions, and the guy goes, so you live in Korea? Like, this is impossible, right? So you live there? I go, yeah. He goes, what do you do? And then then there's this whole weird thing of what my job is. So I'm like, I work for a big company out there. They go, okay, what do you do? And I go, well, I make TV shows, because I feel like
it's hard.
It's so hard
really
to explain what this is.
If you're like, well, actually, I commentate this game called Starcraft. It's a real-time strategy game. It involves 3 races. Like, what are you going to say?
Yeah.
Right?
So he goes, what kind of TV show? Like, he's eventually going to catch me. Like, I don't know.
He got him.
I have drugs in my bags.
He's a cooking show artist. Like, what is he?
So I go, yeah, it's a computer game TV show. And he goes, oh, really? What kind of computer game? And I go, okay, do you know the game Starcraft? And he looks at me, and he's got the stamp in his hand. And he goes, Protoss, Terran. And then he looks at me, like right in my eyes, and I have to say, Zerg. And he stamps it, and I get through.
You should have just been like Night Elf.
Yeah, Night Elf. Oh, God!
Like, it just detains you. You can't come into your own country.
So you were saying that you were in...
yeah, so I was going back.
in the States.
I was going back to the U.S. They were like, nope, you can't come back. I'm like, okay. They first were like, I'll get a notarized stamp and all this shit. I'm like, whatever. I do all this stuff, and they're just like, no, you can't come in. We're just fucking with you, right? It was like a real arbitrary thing. Like, you can't produce all this stuff. You're not allowed in.
Yeah.
And at the end, they're just like, listen, you just have to spend more time in Canada. And I was like, okay, whatever. So I did. And then I was like, well, I'm not going to hinge my pro gaming success on being able to enter the U.S. Clearly, that's,
right.
Not something I can do as a Canadian. But, all that immigration. So I was like, there's only one other place realistically that you would go to compete for StarCraft, and it's obviously Korea. There's no other country you'd fly to.
So this was during Heart of the Swarm? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I feel like it would have been close to Legacy. I wasn't here. Either Legacy just came out, or... Because I wasn't here when Legacy came out, I don't think. I can't remember.
Anyways, yeah.
Yeah.
So then you ended up coming out here, but were you on a team then? Or?
I was on Storm, which is like just a community team, but they've got funds behind them, and they're supporting players, so they helped me get here. But I actually had to contact people, because obviously getting connections to Korea is really hard, especially as someone who's not relatively well known in the scene. Back then, I wasn't that good. So I contacted Huck, because he's also Canadian, and he contacted me with MVP, which was a StarCraft 2 pro team back then.
Yeah, not to be confused with the player, but
yeah, the pro play or the pro team. Back then, it was a pro league team, and yeah, they're basically, okay, you come here, we'll pay me $500, you can stay a month, and I'm like, okay, sounds good. So I came there, paid them $500, it included everything, even food. It was a great deal.
I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear that at that point in time, that you would pay.
Yeah,
them.
I basically did what's going on now. Like, players paying me is basically what I did for them, right?
Right. It's almost like, okay, like we have air conditioning, we've got a house here. You can stay here with good internet setup, and then you play. Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah,
it was great. So I stayed there for a couple months. It was like 3 months. I probably would have stayed there longer. We probably wouldn't even have a team house right now if MVP didn't collapse. Like, it literally collapsed due to the pro league disbanding the team, right? So I was homeless, basically, because I didn't know. Nobody told anybody this, by the way. It was just like 1 week.
It was really abrupt.
They're like, well, we're closing everything down. I'm like, okay. And all the players were like, what?
Yeah.
Right? Nobody knew. We had suspicions, but we all were like, they're going to downgrade something or whatever. But they just like closed everything. All the teams disbanded. So we just kind of were like, well, we're here now. We're in Korea. Nobody's planning on flying back.
So you guys are marooned in Korea.
Yeah.
Your team house is gone.
So we're just like, we'll start our own team house. We don't need no Kespa team.
Damn.
We'll do our own thing.
Damn, Jake. Some badassery right there.
Yeah, it was me and Scarlett. She was living in like a Goshiwan kind of thing.
A Goshiwan is like a very small.
Like a small apartment.
Right? It's like tiny Asian box apartment.
Yeah.
Basically.
So obviously that's not, ideal. Like, we could both be living in separate apartments, or we could get like a 2-bedroom for basically the same price, which way more space and benefits both of us greatly, right?
Right.
So we ended up getting like a cheap apartment in Noksapyeong, which is like
that's the
foreigner
that's
district.
one of the expat districts, like one of the immigrant districts in Seoul.
Basically like
next
the cheapest
to Itaewon,
place we could
probably
find.
known place.
Actually.
Yeah.
We're just like looking up on Craigslist because we for foreigners.
Housing's pretty cheap in that area,
It's
right?
very cheap. It was
Yeah.
$500 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment.
That's actually really good.
Yeah, and we
That's
could walk
really
to
good.
Nooks Up Young for like, it was a 1-minute walk. So.
Damn. You know that housing prices are going to shoot up
they're probably like $1,000 even now.
Hey, try to keep your mouth just a little bit closer to the mic
That's,
there.
okay.
You're good. You're good. Okay, and then now this is ballooned into this giant house. Now you guys are no longer there. We don't need to get too specific, but around what area? You're south of Seoul now?
Yeah, we're like an hour and a half away from Seoul now, but
Okay.
more towards the airport. So that actually benefits a lot of people coming in and out. Like we actually go to the airport more often than we go to Seoul for competitions.
Makes
GSL
sense.
happens 3 times a year, and most of these people fly more than 3 times a year. So it actually benefits them to be there. It's like 30 minutes away from the airport.
And now you're basically the conduit for all of these players
Yep.
coming here. I mean, it's kind of crazy because I've only known you for a couple years, but the spike in non-Korean participation
Yeah.
in these qualifiers is way higher. And
Yeah, I was looking at it. The year before we came, like the year I was in MVP, including me and Scarlett, there were only 5 people participate the whole year, 2017. 5 people. The year after, we had 21 people.
Jesus.
That was the first year,
Yeah.
right? So I think even this last year, we had 15 different countries of people come. So 15 different countries. Obviously, lots of people have dual country or dual people coming in from the country. So,
Right.
it's pretty crazy even. Like having 15 different countries of people coming in and out of the house. Like that's so many different cultures, different languages. It's actually like incredible to like witness all these people from all over the world.
Yeah, and it's I think not even indirectly, just very directly. We've I think you've actually aided hugely in the increase we've had in StarCraft 2 viewership. Over the
Yeah.
last 2 years, our numbers have actually gone up, but I think a large part of that is foreigners are now more able. I always feel like this is misleading. I try to not use the word foreigners that often because it can sound confusing. Non-Koreans participating in GSLs, and even if they don't get that far in GSL, then they perform better at other tournaments, and I think we have a
Right.
much better ecosystem where there's better global competition because it used to be so dominated by Koreans.
Yeah, I agree. I think some of it is the participation in GSL. There's a lot more competition. There's also a lot of interest. Like back in the day when there was all those team houses, that was very interesting to a lot of people, a lot of aspiring players, and a lot of fans. There's just more content that's just unique and interesting. And then on top of that, we have competition within Korea. There's competition abroad that's being done better because players are having better practice out here. And then Sarah also, I would say, contributed a ton to, the uprising viewership as well.
Can you unpack for someone who's listening to this why in a one-on-one game it would still be necessary to be playing in the same house as other people? Because
Right.
I think it's easy to explain to somebody why a Dota team needs to all be in the same room,
Sure.
or a League team. Why is it in a one-on-one? And
Right.
by the way, team play in StarCraft 2,
this-
competition is almost non-existent.
This is very
so,
interesting because
yeah.
if you put it into another 1v1 game that isn't StarCraft, it probably isn't necessary. Like for example, let's say Hearthstone. Hearthstone has a decent amount of strategy, but realistically, anyone who understands card games really well probably doesn't need another person to talk to about it. But for StarCraft specifically, everyone doesn't really understand it perfectly. Nobody does. The game is impossible to understand fully. Getting perspectives of other players and perspectives of even your enemies in some situations, like Scarlet and Special play against each other constantly, getting the perspective of them can benefit you a ton. So it's quite interesting that it happens to improve them so much. Like just being able to have conversations over dinner about what you think about certain things can help you so much.
Yeah, I totally agree. Even for me, when I moved out here, I mean, I've been out here for I think 11 years, but just being out here and then being able to talk to other pros and play with other people in PC cafes, but specifically just sitting down and talking to people.
Right.
When I first got out here, I was with a bunch of poker pros who were former Brood War pros. And just being able to sit down and watch them play and us explain what we're trying to do. Okay, what are you thinking when you're going for this
Right.
build? What is it when you scout their base, what is it you're trying to spot that's going to telegraph their next move? Stuff like that is so helpful.
Yeah, it actually doesn't even need to be, the best pro gamers. If this was just a house of people that could be below the level of where they are, you'd still improve. Like, for example, if Maru is in a house full of people that are around my level, where I would say I'm considerably worse, he would still improve just bouncing ideas off of them. Like the idea or the point is that you're gaining something that you may not necessarily think about yourself, and you can only really get that from outside opinions, right? Doesn't necessarily need to be players that are better. Even worse players can help you quite a bit in just seeing things that you wouldn't necessarily see on your own.
Yeah, it's crazy how that works like that. Now, what is your background exactly in gaming? Because you're 23, I'm 34, so I've got a good 10 years on you. So I grew up, the first real games I played was on an original Nintendo, like an NES. And then my mom we had like a family computer, so I got exposed to, just I guess the big computer games at the time, like SimCities.
Right.
And,
I'm actually curious about some of it myself. Like, I wanted to ask my dad why we had certain consoles when we were growing up, because I never saw him play them, and I never asked for them. Right?
Really?
Yeah. So, for example, I never asked for I was too young. We're talking like 5 years old. I don't know. I want the new Xbox or I want the new. I really didn't know back then.
Yeah.
But we had them, and obviously I was playing them because we had them. I never understood why we had them until this day. I still haven't asked him, and I feel like I should now, just thinking about it, because I actually don't know why. Never saw him play them.
Yeah, because obviously I'm from Kansas, so it's a place where there's not a lot to do.
Right.
And so there's just a lot of people playing games out there. But I always felt like that was a huge factor for me.
It could be as well for me too. Like, could be why we had that, is to actually just, have something to do at home.
Yeah, there's just
because we when we first started, we had pretty much every console going up, right? Like
right.
We had a Super Nintendo, and this had to have been before I was born. We had this, right?
Right.
And then we had the Nintendo 64, and then we had Xbox original, then we had Xbox 360. Like, even before PC gaming was really a thing, because they didn't really know that. I got into PC gaming on my own. That wasn't something that my dad was into.
Yeah, I was about to ask. I mean, it's interesting to see that your family had all the consoles.
Yeah, but he never played
But at the same
them.
time, like the fact that somehow you got into PC gaming, that's really crazy. So did you start with StarCraft 1 or StarCraft 2?
I started with StarCraft 1. My brother was into Brood War when I was very young. I think he's like 27, 28 right now. So he's like that age where he would have been like 10 or 12 when I was like 6. Right. So I was getting into it when I was too young to really understand. I was playing the UMSs obviously back then. I was not playing, one-on-one. It was too competitive. I couldn't really understand it, but I could understand like tower defenses and whatever. But this was really good opener for becoming a StarCraft 2 player, right? Because I knew all the buildings. I knew what they all did. Didn't really understand competition, but that was okay.
Yeah, I started on Warcraft 2. I had this friend. This is going to sound really weird. I had this friend who had a really cool older brother, and the house, it was kind of like a broken home. Like a couple of the kids lived in the basement, but like the parents didn't go down there that much, and there was like a lot of times the dogs would shit on the floor, and it wouldn't be cleaned up for like a few days.
Perfect spot for a gamer.
It was one of those places where I guess I think a lot of people listening will understand this, but the best place to go if you're going to somebody's house, if you're going to play games on it, is the parents weren't really there. Yeah, they were like not.
I totally know what you're saying.
They raised their kids being in front of the
Hell
TV, and so I would go after school. I'd walk to this guy's house, and he had this cool older brother who eventually, I think he got a job at Interplay and some other cool companies. But I would sit there and we would watch him because they only had one computer. This is at the time when everybody only had one computer in their house. You know?
I totally know what you're talking about.
And so he had a computer, and we would watch him play Command and Conquer and him play StarCraft. And, I mean, this is like, I guess, Twitch for me before there was Twitch.
Wait, speaking on this, because I'm actually curious, do you think that that's a reason why Twitch is so popular now? Because I feel like a lot of people our age were really into watching people play games back then.
Yeah, I think so. I'm always blown away by some of these really fucking stupid talking heads on TV that
don't
can't get why
it.
you wouldn't want to watch someone play a game.
It's great.
I don't
That's actually great.
I mean, let's see here. It was Command and Conquer, StarCraft, and then also this is a big one for me, Final Fantasy VII, which at the time was kind of like the big cinematic story RPG.
Right.
Even though if you look at it, like the version that I was looking at back then, the graphics
pixelated.
It's pixelated. Yeah, I mean, Cloud has
crazy.
like
If
fucking
you go
paintbrushes
back,
for hands.
You go back and like see those games like now. You're like, I do not remember the graphics being this shitty.
Yeah,
right?
I had this with Soul Calibur. I was playing Soul Calibur 2, and I remember just thinking, "There's no way we can get better graphics. Like this is it." You know?
Yeah.
It's like we've landed a man on the moon.
Especially when you're younger, you go back and watch those games.
Yeah,
I don't even know
this
how
is
you
horrible.
did this, right?
Like GoldenEye on Nintendo 64.
Yeah.
Like it's almost unplayable. It's like a
Right.
slideshow. When you do the multiplayer,
Yeah.
I'm amazed. That game did not stand the test
back
of
then,
time.
that was the shit, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
Everyone
but that
was
was like a
raving
big
about the
deal.
graphics
And
back
people were
then.
saying it's so real. It's so real. It's so crazy. I mean, it's obviously it's still a great game, but I grew up going to this guy's house. It's actually, this is gonna sound so weird, but when I smell, if I catch a whiff of dog poop,
Yep.
I immediately go back to
You think
my
about games.
memories of Warcraft 2 and
There's
Command
a
and Conquer.
dog poop wind coming by. Oh my
I
god, Final Fantasy
remember
7.
being a child and seeing,
Command and Conquer. These minds are coming back to my mind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so I've always thought it was pretty normal to watch people play games.
Yeah, it is. I agree.
So I'm always amazed that people are surprised. I think anybody who doesn't get why you would watch other people play games has never actually played a game.
Right.
You know?
No,
like,
it's interesting.
My brother and me would always take turns watching each other play Mario or
Yeah.
any of the other games we had growing up.
I mean, it's the same with me too, because my brother was also older, so I happened to be watching more. You know, if you have an older brother, you know what I'm talking about.
Right, yeah.
Like they were always the ones who got to play more than you did. But I remember watching him play all those games too when I was a kid. I remember A Link to the Past being like a big one.
That was a big one.
That was a big one. I was really young. I couldn't even read when I beat A Link to the Past.
Wow.
I couldn't even read. I remember not being able to read. I remember just selecting random things. I remember, like, you know, like you get like multiple fucking. I'm like, what is a ruby? You know, I don't know what the fuck this shit is. Like, I just click it.
Yeah.
I remember playing that game. I don't know if I beat it or if I got really far, and I was just like, this is the end of the game. I don't care what anybody says because I couldn't get past certain parts without being able to read.
Oh
But-
my god, that's so crazy.
Yeah, I remember.
No,
my
I remember
brother was always
there was a time I was super young and I would be playing these. I guess this might not be around. This is old even for me, but these graphic adventure games. Have you seen these point and click adventure games?
Nope.
So there was a. Let me try to describe it for you. So you'd have like a character on like games like King's Quest or Monkey's Island. You have a character on screen, and you have a couple options like pick up, talk to, open or close.
Okay.
And you click around the screen and the character moves around.
Sure.
And then you're trying to solve a series of puzzles to get to the end of the game. So like maybe I need to use the sewing needle to pick the lock on the door, to
Right.
find the knife to kill the ogre that guards the tree, where I get
Sure.
the apple, whatever.
Yeah, this is before my time for sure.
So this is actually what most games were like. There was, like everything's a battle royale now. At the time, everything was a graphic adventure, point and click adventure game.
Nice.
And that was like, I was playing those, but I was definitely at this age. I think my mom used to play text-based adventure games. Have you heard of these?
No, but I can imagine what they are. Like you pick one option A, you go one way. Pick option B, go another way.
No, it's crazier than that, man.
Really?
Your fucking mind's about to be exploded.
I'm ready.
So, I think the most famous one is called Zork, and she knew the people that programmed it. She had some friends that were at MIT who were coding the game, and it would just say, it's just a black screen with white text, and it says like you're standing in front of a white house in the woods. The windows and doors are boarded up.
Uh-huh.
And then you have to type in like look at house or
Really?
go east, go. Yeah, and then you type that in, and then it would be like you're now in the forest. You see
Okay.
that you can't see
I think
the
I know
sky.
what you're talking about.
Yeah, and then you have to by typing.
I think we actually had these in school when I was really young. We're talking grade 1. You know, like this is the earliest games I can remember are like A Link to the Past. These are all games like really young, like I couldn't understand what I was doing, kind of games. I remember we had some of those games in school, like when I was in grade 1. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I think you can still get them now, actually. Anyways, the reason why I was bringing that up is that I remember playing, I think it was like Martian Memorandum, I think was the name of the game. It was one of these old games that had a lot of, I guess, just dialogue, but you mostly had to read it.
Right.
And I was just not at that age. You know what I mean? Where I kind of didn't know what I was doing, but I was kind of clicking around and figuring it out. Damn.
I mean, that's actually one of the greatest ways to learn, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like I found that was when I was accomplishing the most, is I wasn't given rules or anything. I was just kind of trying to figure it out on my own.
Yeah.
And even with StarCraft and all these other games, that's how I learned when I was like, my brother didn't teach me shit,
Sure. Yeah.
I was just testing things, figuring it out. Like we all kind of were, especially in your age for StarCraft, because that was literally like the founding age.
Well, man, I mean, I remember getting online. First of all, this was all up until that point. I think I must have been maybe 13. We finally got American Online, AOL. And for some reason in my head, I sort of had this fantasy of how good I would be.
Right.
It's like I haven't done I felt like my affinity for the game
you like
somehow
dominated every friend in your friend group.
Right. And I just thought, okay, well, it's time for me to go dominate the world, and I would just get fucking owned. And people were so mean too.
Yep.
I remember, and at the time when I started, I wanted to do 7-on-1 comp stomps because I find it too overwhelming to try to play someone
I remember
one-on-one.
those too. That was kind of also what I was getting on with, like when I was really young, right?
Yeah. And I remember getting kicked out of a game because I had too many disconnects. Because that was the time when if my mother picked up the phone, it would disconnect me, and so I had like 6 disconnects, and these guys were saying, ban him.
In the comp
He
stomp?
has too many. Yeah, and
damn, these guys are tryhard.
I know. Yeah, no shit. And I got kicked out of the game, and I was like so emotionally traumatized because I'd never been like. It was like I wasn't allowed to play.
Yeah.
With the adults, or just the other kids who were playing, however old they were.
Yeah, they decided it for you. You didn't even get a trial.
Yeah, and then I went to there was one PC cafe in Kansas City, and we went to that, and these kids were such douchebags. They just. I guess they always were in the PC cafe.
Right.
They just had access to this thing that I didn't have access to. I think I went down there for my birthday as a kid, and they just trashed my brother and me. And they were like older than us, and they were really mean. And
weird.
Yeah. It was
even weirder when it's in person.
Oh yeah. I mean, these are a bunch of young kids being assholes, but I had to get all that out like right away, just kind of experiencing that people can be mean on the internet, and then when StarCraft came out, it's like we didn't know how complex RTS games could be.
Right.
Because the game I played before that was Warcraft 2, but that was more of like for me a fantasy thing. Like I'm controlling an orc army, and I'm excited because I'm controlling an orc army.
It's like the lore behind it.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, for me, the idea of like building zeppelins to spy on other guys and making boats and porting armies across oceans. That was cool, but then when I got to multiplayer StarCraft, I suddenly realized, okay, what is the right way to open up in a game?
Yeah.
And I kept thinking in the first few months I was going to find the right build that just won.
Didn't we all?
Yeah. And then after a while, you would start to realize, okay, there's something's going on because there's a couple guys on the ladder, and the Battle.net ladder was just full of hackers and totally buggy, but there were these private ladders you could play on, and you'd see a guy who was like 53 and 4, and you're thinking, what is he doing? What does he do? God,
or he's a hacker.
And so I can't remember if I brought this up in the other podcast, but my brother and me would just wait in these channels and try to, because this is before replays, by the way, everybody. The closest thing you actually had, you can look it up on the internet, it's called battle reports. And it's a guy who's taken screenshots in the game and written an essay next to it.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never heard of this.
Oh, yeah. I'll show you afterwards. But hold on a second. My cats are fucking going crazy, man. What do you guys want?
You guys couldn't see it. They're jumping on the chair next to us.
They're getting a little crazy over here. No, so we would wait and try to join these games. And I remember there's this player. His name was Jolly. And he was considered like one of the best out there. He was like a household name. If you were a 14-year-old kid and playing StarCraft, you knew who Jolly was. And we would get into the game, and then my brother and me would start to write down
what he's doing.
Pen and paper, what he's doing.
That's cool.
And so we wrote it down, and we went, oh, shit. He goes Reaver. Right at the start, he goes for Reaver. Okay, so he wins that game. Next game starts up. We get back in, right? Mind you, only 6 people could join the game to watch. Right. And everybody's trying to do the same thing that we're doing. Everybody's dogpiling on. So we get in there, and then the next game, he doesn't go Reaver. And we go, what the fuck?
Yeah. He has more than one build.
He's got more than one build?
This guy's a genius.
No.
Right.
Yeah, and it was kind of crazy, and then from there, now here we are, and we've unpacked
it's
RTS
so different
much
even
more.
from my time, because when StarCraft 2 came out, we already had Twitch by that point. Not Twitch. We had Justin TV.
Right.
we were kind of the first to actually create an atmosphere where people were sharing what they were doing online. So there wasn't like this limited, game share. We had so much intel on people already. Like we had Husky Starcraft. We had all these people. Right, this is the beginning of Starcraft 2, right?
Yeah.
There was just so much intel on what people were doing. I feel like our meta evolved really fast at the beginning already. Like people knew. Like we had GSL already. This was being broadcasted to thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Right?
Yeah.
They're very early on. So there's just so much information for us at the start of Starcraft 2. Whereas
Totally different beast.
It's totally different, right?
I was basically a caveman. I was like learning, I was learning about
you were making
fire.
the tools. We had computers already. Yeah.
You guys had like, jets and rocket launchers, and I was trying to figure out how to start
That's
fire.
funny. I kind of wish I was in that era, because I feel like I fit more with that than I do with what I'm doing now. Because even now, I don't follow the traditional meta as a pro gamer.
Yeah.
I like to be, I like to try my own things and see where they work, where they don't, what they fail at, and what they succeed at. But there wasn't as much room for that in StarCraft 2 because it was already so well refined.
Well, you also had a whole lot of people just showing up with a lot of weaponized knowledge. I mean, if you look back, it's still mostly, if you look at the survivors, it's mostly dominated by the StarCraft 1 pros.
Right.
Almost all the guys in GSL. I think literally everybody in GSL played StarCraft 1.
Yeah, they did.
But there was all these Warcraft 3 players that came in. And there was a lot of debate at that time, too. It's like, well, is it going to be the StarCraft players or the Warcraft 3 players?
Right.
We're going to dominate. You had guys like Apollo, which a lot of people don't know, but he's the Command and Conquer World Champion.
I did not know that.
You didn't know that?
Really?
Yeah, dude.
I am Apollo? Like Caster Apollo?
Yeah.
That's sick.
You didn't know that?
I had no idea.
You know that TLO is Supreme Commander. That's not a major RTS.
Grand Wizard? What do you
I don't know what I think he was like a champion of that or something like that. But yeah, you had all these people showing
I'm completely ignorant to everybody's like achievements before StarCraft 2.
Yeah, so there was all these different people kind of showing up. I think this is most profound in fighting games.
Right.
When a new fighting game comes out, there's people from every other game coming in there already.
It's happening with FPSs too now, right? Because
for sure,
we've got CSGO players switching, or Overwatch people switching to like Apex or whatever, right?
Yeah, those skills definitely translate into other games. But it was definitely different in StarCraft. You definitely had people showing up. And also the game was built around a lot of the ideas from Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 1 too.
Yeah, that's what is extremely interesting for me, right? Because I'm coming in as someone who played UMSs only. I was 14 when StarCraft 2 came out. I might have been 13 actually, and I remember playing it constantly all day. But
you were literally the same age that I was when I played StarCraft 1.
Yeah. So that's what's interesting, right?
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah.
So it's almost impossible to be competitive before then. Realistically, like I played the game. I wasn't able to be competitive. Before 14, 13, it's so hard to put time into something and try to be good at something at that age. So when StarCraft 2 came out, I felt I was at the appropriate age to gauge myself on a ladder. And I remember the ladder was the most captivating thing about being a competitive person, because I'd never played a ladder before, ever.
I love laddering.
It was the first ladder.
So sick.
Like I played fucking Call of Duty and Halo.
Yeah.
So as soon as I got to StarCraft, I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah.
I'm a Bronze League player. I can get to silver. This is a thing.
Yeah.
And then I get to silver. I'm like, I get to gold. And then I get to gold, and I was like, I can get to platinum, right? I kept doing this. I remember I got Grandmaster in a year from when I first started playing. So I was like 14 when I got Grandmaster for the first time. But it was so hard to go from Grandmaster to professional, because all those people from, StarCraft 1, from Warcraft 3, they were just so much better than everybody else coming into it.
It's funny, too, because you saw different play styles coming up from the different games that people played.
Right.
But yeah, eventually it got refined. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm a little bit congested here. It really is, I guess, a totally different beast. It's just like when these even when a new Battle Royale game comes out, everybody already kind of knows how to play Battle Royale games. Like, how do you want to loot, or where you're trying to go, good movement patterns.
It's so interesting to think what would Brood War have been if they had the same level of television from the very beginning. From the very beginning, right? Like Brood War.
You mean like with Twitch, or?
Yeah, with Twitch, like people sharing their gameplay immediately. Like imagine Jolly or whoever you're talking about just had a stream back then, and everyone could see this back then.
Yeah,
like
that's a good point.
If there's more information out there for everyone, you see a lot more pro gamers rise up because these are people that don't have access to this information.
This was one of the interesting things that I found when I was I think I had an inherent advantage because I shared a room with my brother,
right,
with Day 9, and eventually we each had a computer.
Oh, crazy.
Oh, that was madness. But I mean, I got to watch him play. He got to watch me play.
Yeah, it's like a little mini team house.
Yeah, it's like a little mini, exactly.
Yeah.
And then occasionally we'd have friends that would come over and they bring their PC. We'd
That's
land
so
there.
cool.
And I think that's how I got acquainted with the game. I think it gave me an advantage over a lot of these guys that didn't have anybody to practice
Another
with.
thing is that you may not give credit to is that might have made you competitive from the start too, right? Like being able to
Sure.
compete with your brother as someone who has a brother is like it's a big motivator.
Oh, yeah.
To be better than my brother at something is like a big motivator, especially StarCraft, because that was the game he introduced me to. Like,
Yeah.
I remember dominating him in StarCraft 2, and that was like, hell yeah, I've made it. He was like, at his best, he was Masters, and I was Grandmaster, so I just destroyed him every time. And then he switched to League of Legends. I was like, hell yeah, I have mission
You
accomplished.
chased him out of the game.
Mission accomplished, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But that competition with your brother already probably elevated the amount you wanted to play and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we had a competition with other games. We were into fighting games as well.
Yeah.
My mom had this rule called the 3 o'clock rule. Fuck that rule, man. So this rule was that it was well-intentioned, but it was that you're not supposed to be watching TV or playing any games until at least 3 p.m.
Right.
And I think the idea was that I would go outside and climb trees or
do what kids do.
Do
Yeah.
what kids do. But, I mean, my brother and me were trying to organize our life. This is back when you had summer vacation.
Right.
You have 3 months off from school. She's working. She's
Well, I mean,
not,
yeah, what are you going to do anyways, right?
So, I mean, we would do things like bike over to our friends' houses and play there. There was an arcade in the mall. Did you not have any arcades near you?
No.
So a lot of the arcades ended up closing down in the U.S., I think, because they didn't do well. There was also a lot of drugs sold out of arcades because you could just kind of stand around, and if you're a drug dealer and not
yeah,
just
I'm sure a lot of teenagers go there too. Or
right,
whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But we would go to these arcades. We would collect quarters in the house and bring like maybe $1 worth of quarters and just try to stretch that out for hours. Like
right.
we would watch everybody else play a game. We'd talk about what game we wanted to play. And we had specific games we were trying to get better at. I mean, eventually we figured out if we played Soul Calibur and we were good, we
play
could
it for a really long time.
Yeah, you'd be playing all day because if you don't lose,
you have to put another coin
in.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Excuse me, a little bit congested today. So we had that. I remember one time my mom walked into the arcade and caught us.
Why?
I think she just knew. I think she figured it out. She's like, "Where are they going all day?" We were so busted, man.
That's funny.
I'm sorry. What were we talking? Why are we on this topic? Right, like laddering and experience. Competition.
Right.
So for you, did you find it competing to be at all emotionally a struggle? Because a lot of people in StarCraft talk about ladder anxiety, or they get depressed.
This is one thing I don't
focus.
actually understand that much about other people. I don't know if it's like, for me, I'm trying to remember how. I remember certain milestones in my career were very emotionally charged. Like, for example, when I was first getting into Grandmaster, I was really close. I remember one season I was so close. I was like, rank 1 master. Back then there was no MMR, so I couldn't tell for sure where I was.
I remember that.
And I was dominating everybody, and then the window opened, and I started losing. And my heart sank. I'm like, no, right? And then I got tilted because of like how emotionally I was into this. Like, this is like before. For me, Grandmaster was the goal, right? I wasn't planning on being a pro gamer. That was my goal. So I started losing, and I went on tilt. I remember losing like 10 games in a row. I'm like, fuck it, I'm not playing anymore. And I missed the window for getting Grandmaster. And for anyone who wants to get Grandmaster the first time, the window is the only time you get in. Like, first time Grandmaster, you do not get in mid-season. Mid-season is for the good players. First time, you got to get in when there's 200 slots. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Once there's not 200 slots, it's way harder. So, yeah, I had to wait another season, and then the next season I got it very easily. But that was like the one time I remember having like an emotionally charged ladder session. And then since then, I've never had an emotionally charged ladder session ever.
Yeah, for me personally, I feel like I can just get owned over and over, and I don't.
I just keep queuing, yeah.
Yeah, I just keep queuing.
I actually queue more when I lose.
I did have an issue when I would go to tournaments for StarCraft 1 where I just was super nervous. I think because we didn't have a lot of tournaments.
Yeah.
And it was so complicated to get me down there, and this wasn't even like a thing
Back
yet.
then,
You know, where it's like, well, how old is the game? Why are you going down and doing this?
Right.
So I used to throw up sometimes at tournaments.
Yeah.
I get nervous.
I think I've
and
heard
puke.
about this before. That's crazy.
I know
I've
some
never
other
had
pros
that
that have had that.
I've never had that happen before, but yeah, I've also heard of it. I think it's very different in our time though, because there's so many tournaments now. Like if this happens, this is like you can play 100 tournaments this in a year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's just so many that I've never heard of any pro gamer now that's like scared of playing online or on television or anything. They're all just so like conditioned for it now.
Yeah. I think you 100%
You actually
right.
need to be.
Yeah.
Like your competition, if they have these like fears and they have these like if they get nervous and stuff, this is a huge disadvantage in StarCraft 2. Like you play up against someone like Neeb and you're nervous, you're dead. Like Neeb does not get nervous. You look at his face, he's not nervous whatsoever.
His heart does not skip a beat.
He is perfectly in tune with everything. So if you're nervous, you're fucked, basically.
I was worried about that because I get a lot of people on my Twitter. Occasionally people bring up ladder anxiety.
Yeah, I don't
I see this
really
on
don't
Reddit.
get it.
And I made some joke. This was a couple seasons of GSL ago. Because I thought, okay, well, people would say they get too anxious to play. I thought, well, that's not good.
It's because they care too much about their rank.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is what I wanted to talk about, is I think that
So
many people who watch StarCraft feel like they understand it,
Yeah.
and then to be confronted with the reality that you might lose or that it's hard to lose, I think can generate some kind of loop of anxiety.
Yeah. I don't get ladder anxiety, but when I'm really high up, when I'm abnormally high up on the ladder, I do not want to queue as much as when I'm lower, for sure.
Right.
I wouldn't call it anxiety, but more like...
Well, that sounds more like a reservation.
Yeah.
Where you're like, okay, I'm really high up. I really need to play an actual
I don't know how to explain it, actually, because I'm not worried about losing my rank. It's more like I've done so well already that I don't... I can only go down. For example, like when I get up to like 6, 7, which is like, we're getting at our stats levels... And I'm like,
right.
I'm not stats. I'm definitely going down.
Yeah, I think sometimes you'll see people who ladder and they almost treat it like it's a slot machine.
Yeah.
Like the people that cheese over and over.
Well, that's how I feel. I feel like I'm putting a coin in every time I play a ladder game. Yeah.
People who like cannon rush, like they have that one cannon rush and they're just trying to ride that high.
Oh, yeah, those people will definitely like... I play against tons of people that cheese me, and they will always delay the queue before they play the next game.
Oh,
you don't want to get the same person, right? So I started arbitrarily delaying my queue after those people because I want them so badly, right? Because I want to dominate them the next game because I know how easy it is to deal with it if you know it's coming.
Right.
So I'll delay my queue arbitrarily, and half the time I'll get them. I'll just absolutely fucking mop the floor with them the next game, right?
That's
and
so
it's the
sick.
Greatest feeling ever because those cheesy motherfuckers, they're delaying the queue, right? And you're
right.
doing it as well.
That's so funny, man.
Sometimes also there's a way you can like message each other and then see if you're in game or not.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone messaged me, I'll open up a custom game. So it'll show I'm in game. They'll queue up and then I'll queue up and get them. I shit you not.
Oh, that's so sick.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I wanted to bring up the ladder anxiety thing because you spend a lot of time mentoring pros.
Right.
And I think I've seen you work with a lot of different personality types.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think you do more than manage a team house. I think you do a lot of coaching, and I think you do a lot of mentoring for these guys. And I guess for someone who's watching this who maybe it's something we can talk out together, but someone who is too afraid or too anxious to queue up on ladder, how do you deal with that?
I would ask them what their aspirations are within the game are. If you aspire to be somewhere higher than you are, then you should be playing ladder. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's impossible. Like unless you aspire to be, if you're say platinum 4 or 3, and that's what your aspirations are. You want to be a platinum 3 player, then sure, don't queue. But I guarantee you, nobody's like, I want to be at my level. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everyone has greater goals within what they do, and you'll never achieve those without playing more. You learn more from your losses. There's really nothing to be anxious about.
Yeah, I found if I look at laddering like it's the gym.
It's kind of like the gym.
Yeah, because here's what, for people, maybe people don't realize this, but even if you're the best player in the world, you're supposed to be losing about 50% of the time.
Yep.
In practice.
It actually doesn't help you to win 80% of the time.
Yeah, I think people imagine that the best players in the world literally just don't lose games. Like everybody in GSL is not losing anything, and then eventually they all stumble into the same studio. Okay. These are the other guys.
Somebody has to lose.
Somebody has to lose now.
Right.
I mean, Guillaume Patry, who is XDS Gur, the first best StarCraft player. He was a Canadian guy. The first best StarCraft player in Korea was a Canadian guy that came out here. And he had this interview a long time ago that I saw. This is one of the guys that actually helped me out a lot when I first moved out here. And he said, if I'm not losing at least half my games, I'm just playing with the wrong people. Because he had some interviews on TV where I think people assumed that this is a guy who just beats everybody. And what is it like? You never lose, and you just seem to get it. No, I mean you're supposed to just be losing constantly.
Right. No, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
I've been playing a lot of other races now because I'm trying to be a better commentator / coach, and I need more information on other races. With my Terran specifically, I learned so much from my losses. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, I will not learn anything from winning because the players I'm playing against are way worse than me. Right?
Right.
But when I play someone who dominates me, I learn a lot about, like, say, vision or engagements and economy. And, like, you just need to keep playing realistically. Also, you shouldn't have that issue where you're not playing, like, Guillaume played a different era. There wasn't a ladder you queue up against someone around your level. You know what I mean?
Right.
Now you have that. You have no excuse to not play,
Well, I think, maybe I'm going too far with this. But we're also in this era now where, like, there are schools that don't give out grades.
Oh, I totally understand what you're saying.
This kind of, like,
I remember back in the day, in StarCraft 2 when it first released, we had a thing that told you who was better than the other person right in the loading screen. You remember? I don't know if you remember, but there used to be a favored, slightly favored, and even match.
I remember that.
Right.
Yeah,
they took that out. We're like, okay, what the fuck? That was weird. And then they took out losses. So we're like, what? We're not allowed to know how many losses we have now?
I think, because this happens a lot more in coastal areas. In the East Coast and West Coast is schools that don't have grades, kind of a fear. Like, everybody gets a trophy at the Little League thing.
Right.
And Blizzard being a company in California, I wonder if they've almost
adopted
that unintentionally, because even the bucketing system initially, or like hiding MMR, or taking away slightly favored, it's like, okay, but this is a ladder.
Right.
I need to know if I'm actually interested in climbing this thing. I need to know where I'm at.
Right.
Because I just wonder if maybe so much of a certain generation of people have been exposed to not having any negative feedback.
I'm actually curious if that helps with anxiety, though, too.
But I think that makes anxiety.
Yeah.
Is then if you've never been told, okay, you fucking suck, or you've lost, you're all the way down.
I'm just waiting for them to take out ranking systems, because realistically, if you're bronze, that's like a pretty negative thing, right?
Well, and I think it's good they have things like bronze, right?
Yeah, but
so you end up in bronze, you go, oh my god, okay, well,
right.
I gotta
get up
improve.
there.
But I think they bucketed it in a certain way, and they were trying to hide it. I just wonder if because I think at this point in time, gaming is one of the last things that we have that'll challenge us and really confront us with honesty about where we're at.
Sure.
Where it's like, no, man, you're exactly average.
Right.
I don't want to be average.
Yeah.
I want to be. Well, you're not.
And you're also fully responsible for that too, right?
Right.
Like no one's putting you in bronze. That is you. You are putting yourself in bronze.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like.
Because you're fully responsible for your getting out of it, and you're fully responsible for where you are. So.
I never heard about ladder anxiety when I was playing StarCraft 1, and I was way more active on forums, and now I hear about it all the time.
I feel like I didn't either when we were playing, because I used to have some school friends that played it, and we just played tons and tons of games. I don't know if it was just the competition or what, but we never stopped and be like, well, I'm Platinum 1. Like, if I play a bunch of games now, I might lose. Like, no, we were always like, we got to get Diamond. We're not going to get Diamond without playing. So
yeah,
we just kept playing. And then when we got Diamond, it was Masters. Then we got Masters, it was Grandmasters, right? And there's keeping like this evolution of progress and higher goals. And that's how we got where we were.
I also feel like laddering is among the most rewarding things you can do.
Yeah, totally.
As kind of an intellectual pursuit.
Yeah.
I had this whole period where my leg was broken. For about 4 months, I was in a cast, and I had never played competitive card games, really, and so I decided to try to figure Hearthstone out, and it was just really fun.
Your arm, right? Not your leg.
My knee. No, my knee was broken.
Oh, okay.
I've been broken a couple times. I was in a cast. I busted my knee in Azerbaijan.
Oh.
At a tournament.
How does this happen? I've never heard of things.
You don't know about this?
No, I mean, like, I've never broken a bone, so I don't even know what you're talking about.
I've been broken a couple times.
I'll
tell. No, so we were in Azerbaijan, which I think a lot of It's actually an amazing country. Baku's an amazing city, but a lot of people might not know where Azerbaijan is. You can Google it just by the Caspian Sea. It's a little bit north of Iran. Great tournament. Had an awesome time. I was casting Starcraft 2 and Hearthstone down there. And we were at the after party. And maybe like an hour in, I had tried to jump behind Dan to startle him. And I was
what a way to break your leg.
And so my foot stepped on this table leg
that
I didn't see and it popped my knee out. And I guess apparently my knee popped back into place. But I thought, oh my God. And I turned to Dan and I said, I think I fucked my knee up. And we sat down there and my knee swelled up to like the size of a cantaloupe.
Yeah.
They had to get an ambulance. And I was just dragged right out of there.
I don't know if I'm just incredibly lucky. I've never broken a bone in my body.
I mean, this was among the most unlucky things I've ever experienced.
It just sounds extremely unlucky.
This is among them. This was a couple years ago. And so we were in this ambulance, and they let Dan come with me. And at some point in time, the lady, the EMT in the back of them, it's like they were driving really fast. She fell on my knee.
Oh, my God.
I was like, it was so painful that I started laughing. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, I mean,
I was like, it was crazy.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I was in so much pain. We got down there. They put a cast on me. I had to fly from Baku to Doha in Qatar.
Qatar.
Is it Qatar or is it Qatar? I've heard of both.
I've never heard of Qatar. But
yeah, I was put in a wheelchair. I had to get, from there. Had to be flown back to Seoul. And then they had to again do like a whole MRI thing on it, and they said you're going to be in a cast for 4 months. And so I decided in that time, I'm like, well, I'm going to try to get a little project going.
Right.
I'm going to try to learn how to play competitive card games because my brother played a lot of Magic. I wasn't as into it. Dan used to go to Magic the Gathering tournaments, and I thought, okay, I can do this. I can figure this out.
Right.
And I did some research on like competitive card game theory, and learned that. And it was really fun for me to ladder, and I eventually got Legend.
Right.
But I love that experience.
Yeah, of course.
And that was how I tried to use
Did you ever have ladder anxiety in Hearthstone? Like,
no, I did. Well, I did once. I think I was like right at rank 1, and I bumped into Forsen. And I went, oh, is it really Forsen?
Yeah.
And we had a good game, and then he killed me. But that was more like, oh my God!
But you still queued up
after
for that
after
game,
the game was done. I opened it up and I'm like, okay, it is him. I see him streaming the game. No, I never got. I don't think you can get anxiety though as easily in a card game. I think that turn-based games.
It should work the same way though. You'd think, right? Because it's still a ranking system. You still don't want to lose your star or whatever, right?
Yeah,
it's weird to think about it.
But I don't. I mean, do you hear people saying they have anxiety?
No, I feel like I only hear this in StarCraft. Only hear this in StarCraft.
Yeah,
I don't know why. Like
maybe it's because you're juggling this mechanical.
Sure, but you're just as like
stuff
my point is you're just as responsible for your win or loss in Hearthstone as you are in StarCraft, right?
Right. Well, a lot of people on Hearthstone Reddit would disagree with you, but
perhaps it could be the fact that people feel like they are doubting their abilities before they play their game.
Well, that's probably at the core of ladder anxiety. Is
right.
this? You're more focused on where you want to be than being confronted with where you might actually be at.
Sure.
You know, because the best players I know can just lose all day and not.
Yeah, you just keep playing. You just
feel much. Yeah, you just keep playing. And I think you also have to take advantage of what your loss was. Like you can't be a whiny bitch and truly blame your race entirely, and get better.
There's a lot of players that just whine.
I was talking to Clinton Paper Thin in the first podcast about this, that I feel like because you have companies like Blizzard that will say, we hear you, we listen,
they whine
you have
more.
This whole meta game where it's like you have to lobby for your race.
I need my voice out there, yeah.
Yeah, where in StarCraft 1, there was one patch.
Right.
And that was it. And what's funny is with StarCraft 1, that game is shockingly balanced. And we're still figuring stuff out about it. But if that game had come out now, most certainly it would be patched and probably neutered and watered down.
StarCraft 1 is so different, though. Like, because it mechanically is so challenging that it can. For example, if people had mechanics figured out perfectly right now for StarCraft 1, it would be imbalanced, 100%.
What do you mean by figured out?
Like, imagine in Brood War, you could hotkey as many units as you wanted.
Oh, the game would be a disaster.
Well, my point is, if you found the way to be that efficient in Brood War, the game would be broken, right?
Right.
Like, it's just so mechanically demanding that even though it's basically figured out to the maximum a human can do.
Right.
But if for whatever reason you could elevate that, it would be more imbalanced.
Yeah, I think StarCraft 1 has this interesting factor where it's people don't seem to understand that the game is actually about priority.
Right.
You can't do everything. And
it's just impossible.
There's going to be some TL kid who's going to start talking. Hold on. I was like, hey, guys. Sorry, my cats are fighting.
The podcast. The bane of the podcast
right,
existence is the cats.
They were really good in the last podcast, but now they're like running all over here and jumping around. What was I saying?
We were talking about Brood Wars.
You know, you'll get some kid on Team Liquid who will say, but Flash does everything perfectly. No, he doesn't. I've watched his stream.
Yeah.
He has to prioritize things.
But
StarCraft 2 is a sped up
right
game where they've cleaned up the mechanics because the mechanical component of StarCraft 1 makes it almost impossible for new people to come in.
Yep. My point being, though, StarCraft 2 needs that, right? If we just touched it once and we're just like, we're done, the game would be horribly broken because the mechanics are so much easier to perfect.
Right.
And it becomes more of a what unit beats what unit, what strategy beats what strategy. Whereas in Brood War, it's not necessarily the case, right? You don't go into a game against Flash and be like, well, this strategy is going to beat his strategy, or this unit's going to beat his unit. Like, it's way more like you just mechanically have to keep up with him.
Right. And then there's also, there's so many little mini games. The game, if you look at the StarCraft 1 game, it looks like it's much slower. Both StarCraft 2 and StarCraft 1 players are playing it at basically the same speed. We could even chart that with APM. But in StarCraft 1, they're having to do all the heavy lifting mechanically. And I know that, and I think a lot of publishers wanted to stray away from that, is that's not what we were trying to do. We were trying to make a strategy game. Yeah, well, the mechanical component's really important as well.
Even between iterations of StarCraft 2, the mechanics have gone way down. Like, for example, in the beginning, you had to split your own workers. You didn't have F2. Like, this is Wings Liberty, right?
That's right. They've automated a lot of
they've
different
done
parts.
a ton of it. They literally have numbers over your hatcheries.
Do you think that's bad? What is your take on that?
It depends on the way you want the game to go. Because the more you do this, the more you go into, like, the mental aspect of the game, right?
Right.
The more we refine mechanics and make them less important, the more the mind games become important.
Right.
So it's a kind of a question of, do you prefer mechanical game versus the mind games?
They've had this issue with fighting games off and on. Is that some combos are very hard to input in some fighting games, and in other fighting games they make the combos incredibly easy.
Right.
And it's basically this argument of, like, let's take Street Fighter 4 for instance. You can know what the combo is and still not be able to do it if you practice a lot. Like, you really have to have that input perfect. I might be getting I think it was Marvel vs. Capcom 3.
I'm actually not going to know any fighting
games.
But
Combo input was very easy.
But I understand where you're going with this anyways.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to get at is basically, I see both sides of the argument, right? I mean, I see that, if the game is too mechanically challenging, what about the strategy?
Right.
But if the game's too strategically too strategically accessible, there's no gamification of the actual
way
it's executed?
It's interesting to think about, because I'm actually okay with it going either way.
Right.
I'm okay with them dumbing down or making the mechanics easier.
Yeah.
And then we getting into, like, crazy strategies, because that's basically what happens, right?
Right.
Or, like, it's kind of hard to just be a dominant macro player when there are people that are just going to be that and also be smarter. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, for example, Scarlet is dominant with mechanics, but she's also very good at doing strategies that will just kill you. Right. So the more we become mechanically easier to play out, the more we'll have mechanically, almost perfect people. And then that kind of branches out to, now you need to be better strategically.
By the way, just to put this out there, I'm not advocating one over the other here.
No, I think they're both fine, actually.
I think they're both great games. I like
if
them
we
both.
took out mechanics and we made StarCraft 2 harder, it would just mean that people spend more time perfecting mechanics.
Right.
Which is still fine. Then we're kind of getting into Brood War territory, which is kind of why I like where StarCraft is going.
Right.
StarCraft 2, because we actually have what we're talking about in Brood War, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of cool if we go the other way with StarCraft 2. They're almost the different, like, opposites, where we can see which one happens to go which way and how they turn out. So I'd almost like StarCraft 2 to even go more this way. So we have even further just for the aspects of like, okay, here's our mechanically demanding games, Brood War, and here's our strategically demanding game, StarCraft 2.
Yeah, it's
just really interesting to think where it would go, even like say 10 years from now, like we go even further down the rabbit hole,
right.
And StarCraft 2 say it gets even easier mechanically, where we'll go into crazy strategies. You have to find a way to beat your opponent, right? It has to happen.
I always wonder, because if they have a StarCraft 3 that they wanted to make, you have 2 StarCrafts. By the way, they're both played. They both have about the same number of players in
Which
each
is
game.
crazy. Yeah,
I've seen the numbers. So because people are always telling me, this one's way bigger than this one. To simplify it, they have almost the same user base, the same number of players online. Viewership-wise, Koreans prefer StarCraft 1. Viewership-wise,
StarCraft 2.
Yeah, globally it's StarCraft 2. Although there are pockets in both. There's a non-Korean scene that watches StarCraft 1, and a Korean scene that watches StarCraft 2. But they're both about the same size. But I would always wonder, if you're going to have a StarCraft 3,
right?
Do you try to merge the two? Do you try to go somewhere in the middle with those?
I think it's impossible, though. Because I think the reason why so many people are into Brood War is nostalgia now.
Yeah.
I think the game is amazing. Don't get me wrong. And I think as a StarCraft 2 player, I can really respect Brood War. But I think a lot of them grew up on it, right?
Right.
And it was so massive back in the day, right? Brood War was insanely... It's bigger than a lot of esports are now, right?
Yeah, it is. It's so big
it's so
that it's
popular
crazy.
in Korea still.
Every time I get on the train,
down on it, right?
Every time I get on the train, I look over, someone's watching it on their phone.
Yeah, sure, for sure. It's just
huge.
so big. I don't know if it's because of nostalgia purposes. Obviously, the game was amazing at some points, and it still is amazing. But if they made a StarCraft 3, I don't see that all those Brood War players switching over. You know what I mean? Otherwise, we probably would have saw it in StarCraft 2, is my point.
Well, we did see it in StarCraft 2.
Yeah, but we saw them all go back because Brood War had a bigger following still in Korea.
That is true. I think you also have situations where there's some players that are better in one than the other.
Yeah,
for instance, Fantasy is an excellent StarCraft 2 player. But he was like a god in StarCraft 1.
Right.
But he seems to think
Fantasy, I think, just prefers StarCraft 2.
He prefers StarCraft 2.
Because Fantasy could be making a lot of money playing Brood War, right?
Right. But he prefers StarCraft 2. And then you have someone like Rain or Sulky, who are very dominant in StarCraft 2.
Yep.
At times the best players in the game. And then they switched back to StarCraft 1.
All of
and they've
them
also
did.
been the best players.
Jaedong and Flash,
right.
They were all pretty good at StarCraft 2 as well.
I think it's also that if you stream StarCraft 1 on Africa TV, you just make so much money.
Yeah, that's another thing. I think, like, let's say in a hypothetical StarCraft 3 comes out. I do believe they would try it. But realistically, they have a confirmed base of fans in Brood War. Those fans aren't going anywhere. They would have disappeared already by now. I could be wrong here, by the way. We're just speculating. But it feels like the chances of this happening where they would all switch to StarCraft 3 and it would just be that is very unlikely, because that's what should have happened with StarCraft 2. That was the goal with StarCraft 2. The goal was to kill Brood War, which we know is all true.
Right.
And bring all those people to StarCraft 2. That was the goal.
Hey guys, we're just taking a quick intermission here in the podcast. I do want to plug our Patreon and also a donor who donated a lot to the point where we get to mention his name in the podcast. John Kernanke, thank you so much for supporting us here. It really is appreciated. If you guys are enjoying what you're hearing here in this interview or in other interviews in the podcast, it's really appreciated if you can support us at patreon.com/tastelesspodcast. The donations there go to make this podcast more awesome and help us continue to upgrade this to make the overall experience better. I guess that's it. We're going to go back to our interview now with NoRegreT. For those of you who've been supporting us, thank you so much. I love you guys. This has been an interesting phenomena that's happening with a few games, or has happened with a few games. So I'll get an example that's not StarCraft here. Smash Brothers Melee. Now, same thing with StarCraft 1, by the way, nobody was thinking about esports when these games were made.
Right.
Esports was basically non-existent before StarCraft came out. StarCraft was the first game that kind of institutionalized and televised this and regularized. When you look at what happened with Smash Melee, it was just supposed to be this party game. It was a fighting game. It was attempting to be an improvement on the Nintendo 64 Smash Brothers.
Right.
But nobody saw this shit coming, where we're still learning about Melee.
Right.
Where there's still stuff people are unpacking. And Nintendo's had an interesting challenge with this, because they want their new game to be the game, right?
Right.
And it's like, how do you, on some level, I think they almost want to say, how do we get these guys to just switch over?
It's not as easy.
We keep
right?
making these games. They're aware of what made Melee popular. I mean, Nintendo has some of the best game designers in the world, and they're trying to expand on it and build it. What's the new Melty? What's the new Smash called? Smash Ultimate. Thank you. Which looks pretty sick. And it does have a pro scene. I've got some friends out here that actually run some tournaments for that. But it's somehow you can't get these people to switch over, and then you have to say, okay, well, what do we do with these guys?
I think a part of it's nostalgia, honestly.
I don't know if it's all nostalgia. I would almost say part of it's that this game is just fine, and they're not happy with the newer versions that are coming out, or they think that the newer versions are lacking.
The thing is, too, the newer versions are always way different. Right. It's not like they're just releasing the same game with better graphics or whatever.
Right.
And that's another thing. Brood War and StarCraft 2 are so different.
They are.
They're actually totally different.
Yeah, I think they're like the two best RTS games ever made.
Yeah,
and
they're
Warcraft
totally
3
different
as well. Obviously, an excellent game. But
so like the same happens with the other games. So people just prefer the other games because they're just different. They're different games.
So if you go on like internet forums in Korea, Koreans say, "Well, I don't want to play StarCraft 2. Everything's automated."
Well,
I don't like that it's automated. And then
Right.
if you go on forums in the States, people talk about StarCraft 1, they'll say, why am I doing all the heavy lifting? I want to do my strategy.
you're right.
So they're both,
Yeah,
the
it's
thing
just
that they
different.
like is the thing that the other person doesn't like. So I guess there's no
Right.
way to really marry the two, maybe. I don't know. I
think, for example, if we had a StarCraft 3, I don't think they would go backwards in terms of mechanics. I just don't see it happening, right? Because we're moving forward towards more automation even now. Like some of the biggest changes, and it feels so nonchalantly added as well. Like F2 is such a huge difference where you can just press one button, have your entire army selected.
Right.
These are huge differences that felt nonchalantly added. Like, oh, we'll just throw this in.
Yeah.
Like, hello? This is like a different game now, right? And another thing that changed the game totally different is they added little numbers on top of the hatcheries or Nexus or CCs that tell you saturation, perfect saturation.
Right.
It'll tell you when you're oversaturated, when you're undersaturated. This was half the game, you know?
Yeah.
Having a perfect economy was half the game, and they just took that out nonchalantly. Like,
Yeah, I thought that was weird when they
it's
did that.
crazy. I don't even think they know how the impact even now. Also, you can literally hover your mouse over top of like your supply right now.
Yeah.
It'll tell you how many workers you have.
Yeah.
Like that shit's mind blowing. Like I can see I have 80 drones perfectly. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, for me as a StarCraft 1 player, I mean, I had to
You had to
I
do
had
all
to-
this
I had to
stuff.
retain
That's
all that
half
in
of the work.
Right. Okay, I'm going to
Even in StarCraft 1 or StarCraft 2, like Wings of Liberty, that was half the work.
Right.
And it's just gone now.
Yeah.
And it's the same game.
Yeah, it's there seems to be a strain from trying to get further and further away from kind of the mental juggling. I guess
Yeah.
they're trying to make the game. The
They're
problem
trying
is
to make it more
StarCraft 1 and
accessible.
2 are the hardest games ever made.
That's
right?
what exactly. So
Now,
they're trying to make it more accessible. That is the point.
In my head, part of me wants to say, okay, but you have the Dark Souls of multiplayer games.
Right.
Like you should embrace it.
Yeah.
And I think a
agree.
lot of big companies say, well, we want to get as many people involved as we can. And I'm like, okay, but I don't know if these two ideas can occupy the same space, you know?
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
even a hypothetical. Let's say we make as much automation as possible for StarCraft 2. It's still going to be way harder than most games.
Oh, then basically
Like you're just,
all games.
it's
Yeah.
basically becomes chess, right? There's no real mechanics in chess. It's all mind games. Like we're going to get to a point where StarCraft, you don't need mechanics, you need intelligence. And that not necessarily isn't going to make the game easier.
Right.
Like let's say we take all the mechanics out, it's still going to be so challenging to like you have full scouting. You like there's no way they just take the minimap fog away because then obviously it's not StarCraft anymore.
Right.
If they take that out, I'm out. By the way, you guys can clip this. And
It's interesting to see from a developer standpoint what they thought was a bug and not a feature.
yeah,
You know?
it's crazy how nonchalantly they change these things, not really knowing how big of a difference it
I
becomes.
mean, you should have seen people in StarCraft 1 forums before the game came out when there was multiple building selection. People going, what? This is insane. Wait, hold on. I want to shift gears here for a second. I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
Why do you think people are not making RTS games anymore?
I think it's just the hype of like certain games shadows certain things. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like the fact that PUBG and all these games are so popular that everyone wants to jump in on it. And I just don't think that there's much. First off, competing with Blizzard.
Right.
I got to go back a bit. Competing with
Please.
Blizzard for the best RTS is going to be really fucking hard. Right? Like all the companies that used to compete against them are gone basically, right? Like we don't really see...
I think it was Westwood, Virgin Entertainment, the people that made... Can you look this up, Melty,
Like the
please?
people who made Command and Conquer, they're not really doing it anymore. Warcraft
the
was
newest
Starcraft's competitor. Like this is also Blizzard.
Yeah.
Like,
One of the reasons why I was asking is, okay, so all the other RTS games that come out are copying a different RTS model.
right.
The largest model that has been copied is the Command and Conquer model.
Westwood Studios bought out by EA.
Westwood Studios bought out by EA, and then
2003, and then it was just like EA knockoffs.
I didn't realize EA.
Yeah. So basically, my point being,
Yes.
competitors. They have to compete with Blizzard, which is really, really hard. Blizzard's been in the game for 20, 30 years almost.
I mean,
Like,
I think out of all the games that Blizzard makes, they are clearly
Dominant.
Their RTS games are actually out of all the
Absolutely
genres they've covered,
RTS is they have figured out.
fucking
Yes.
kill it with RTS.
It would be nearly impossible to come out. Let's say I'm a new indie developer. If I'm
Right.
going to make an RTS to compete with Blizzard, it's impossible.
But hold on a second. There have been some successful indie RTSs that have come out.
Successful.
Have you played They Are Billions?
Okay, yes.
That's a great
yes,
game.
They Are Billions is great.
They Are Billions is actually
But it's a different model, right?
it's modeled off of Age of Empires.
Right.
So this is what I was trying to get at is that did you play Grey Goo?
I have,
Oh.
yes.
That was a disappointment.
Yes, Gregu was trying to be a competitor to StarCraft. That's what it felt
But it was
like.
using the Command and Conquer model. Now the Command and Conquer model does not appear to be viable for
Competition?
intense esports multiplayer. I think the Command and Conquer model is actually a lot of fun to play. I played
PvE aspect of it is a lot more fun, I would say.
right PvE. It's fine, and I think They Are Billions. I think is just a masterpiece for
PvE
RTS.
as well.
PvE,
Yep.
but a really challenging PvE where you basically make.
I
if
feel
the
like we
zombie
actually-
touches your building once, you're fucked.
We actually do see those RTSs though, like some. Obviously, we don't see them in high numbers. What we don't see are competitive RTSs because those are really hard to make.
This is what I'm getting at: is that why has nobody just copied the StarCraft model?
It's impossible, I think.
No, hold on, because I really want to unpack this.
I'm
I
down to
feel
unpack
like
this.
you can have workers mining from minerals
Right.
and have a gas. It's the economic
Uh-huh.
component. I don't know why that can't just be recreated.
If you want
Nobody's
to
trying
copy StarCraft, why not just play StarCraft though?
everybody's trying to copy Command and Conquer, and that keeps failing.
I guess, and everyone's
And
trying to copy PUBG too. Like,
yeah, this is what I was getting at.
I think putting twists on these games are much harder. You need a big studio to back you in this situation. I think.
sure.
Even programming, I have to imagine programming an RTS is a lot harder than certain games. Like it
That I don't know.
seems.
I don't
It seems. I also could be wrong here because I'm not a programmer. I'm a programmer, very limited amount of programming.
Yeah.
I feel like you need a lot of resources behind you to have a competitive RTS actually succeed. And a lot of these games aren't interested in competitive RTSs because Blizzard is just so monopolized RTS competition in general.
So your opinion is basically that because StarCraft is so profoundly dominant,
Yes.
that it
competitively at least,
right,
specifically.
that it's hard to have a company incentivized to try to compete.
Yeah. And also, if let's say StarCraft was the PUBG or Apex or whatever
Right.
of RTS, I bet we would see it. Or League, right? The viewership it's not like 200, 300,000 where people want a slice of the pie, big companies, because big companies could compete with StarCraft. I'm not going to say that StarCraft is untouchable.
Right.
It's just indie developers that I feel would not be able to compete with a competitive, because no one's going to switch from StarCraft over to, let's say, fucking Bob Jr.'s, StarCraft, whatever.
Well, Bob Jr. might disagree with you.
Yeah,
but,
Bob Jr. might, but yeah.
I mean, you might be right. I mean, I guess also if you're going to get people to switch out of a game, you
need
got to
money.
have money. Because one thing is very true about RTS is people seem to kind of stay in their tribe.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at FGC, people
Well,
switch. People
We
move.
don't really have a choice, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, I imagine, let's say League, Riot was just like, you know what? We're going to release our own fucking League RTS. And it's very similar to StarCraft. 100% people are switching. 100%.
Yeah.
Like, no doubt in my mind. And it's always going to be the lower tier people. I would be in the category of possibly switching because I'm at the level where I'm just barely not very good, but my understanding of the game is very good. I'm very strong, so I just need some shift ups to become very good, right?
Yeah, you can basically
So
move
all the
in and
people
dominate.
below, say, Major, Cyril, like these people below, people that are just trying to break into the pro scene, those people are very susceptible to switching because they are most likely to succeed in another RTS. It's not going to be like the dominant, because the dominant are already making so much money doing what they're doing.
Right.
It's the people that are very aspirational and can't really get out of their bracket, because it's really hard to do that in StarCraft. So you would see tons of people switch. I can promise you. We even saw people trying to switch to heroes. Like, people are desperate to switch.
Heroes was an odd time, man.
Yeah, like there's StarCraft people were switching to heroes, right? Like there were tons of them.
No, there was this exodus. I mean, even for me, I was casting heroes too.
Yeah.
It was just like, okay, well, this is extra work.
You gotta try it, right?
My goal is not to switch into a new game, but
Well, the
I'm
pro
sort of in a
gamers are
different.
more kind of confirm, like they kind of have to dedicate it,
Right,
like
right.
That they're kind of more committed to the switch.
It's a little bit different for me.
You can
'cause-
kind of dabble, but they have to like commit.
Yeah, I'm just going to a different studio. It's like 20 minutes from my house and playing there, so it's not. But yeah, I remember that whole period where everybody was suddenly a MOBA guy.
Yeah, there were lots of them.
Yeah.
Like Idra, I remember Sheth,
LZ
Gamer. Like all these people weren't, the top echelon anymore. They
Right.
weren't. Like they were overtaken by other people, so they were more, interested in finding the next thing that they could be good at. Obviously, it didn't work out.
This is also a phenomenon that happens in esports in general.
Yeah, of course. It
Is
does.
a new
It really
game
does.
comes out and you see
We saw people do it Overwatch.
whether it's tournament organizers or casters, you'll see this kind of exodus.
shift.
It makes sense.
Yeah, they're just
If
trying
people
to
aren't
make it. They're trying
satisfied
to
where
make
they're
it,
at. Right. Yeah.
It's hard to do it in a rut when you're like, for me, I was good enough to say I'm successful in StarCraft 2,
right.
and I'm ready to go to another thing. If something was released, I would try it, and if I liked it, I would go for it, kind of thing.
Right.
It wouldn't mean I'd drop StarCraft, but I don't have anything to lose. I'm not
Sure.
the best player.
Sure, totally.
What do I lose? I lose my ladder rank. I can come back and get that, right?
Speaking of Heroes of the Storm, what do you think? I guess I'm sure everybody already knows, but I'll say it anyways. In recent news, they've closed down
Right.
the HGC, right? Yeah, HGC.
Yeah.
No circuit.
I think it's crazy.
I'll tell you what, dude. I did not fucking see that coming.
No. I always thought this
I-
might be a little selfish of me, but I was always like StarCraft is fine as long as we have heroes.
No, I thought the
Because
same
I was
thing.
always like, heroes is going to be on the chopping block, but now that heroes is gone,
yeah.
StarCraft is like the next in line.
Well, that's what I always thought. Is I always looked at Heroes and I thought, okay, well they're still doing their thing.
right.
So
I think
guess
the way they
everything's
did
fine.
it was like a really bad way, by the way. Like it's totally condemnable. I think the best way I totally agree with cutting budget, because obviously Heroes is never going to overtake Dota or League. It's not happening. I think that was their original aspirations with it. They're like, hey, we're going to release a competitor. Didn't work out as well as they thought it would.
Yeah.
Totally fine to slow it down a bit, because that's, productions are really expensive. But I think a motto more like what we're doing with WCS, which is obviously also a budget cut, would have been better implemented there, because the viewership, it isn't great, but it's worth it to not be someone who drops esports. Like that's what the motto is to keep, supporting your games, right?
Right.
Keeping people feeling like there's that support that you can almost trust constantly is worth the investment in keeping the esports alive. So I would have liked to see some system where they kind of had the WCS online circuit.
Yeah, it's
More crowdfunding even. Like there could have been ways to work around the even if they had to invest money, sure, invest money though, like it's worth it to keep it
it's
going.
kind of weird, right? Because I don't believe that games have to go away. I mean, I'm very happy when I Mike Morhaime told me way in advance that they were going to remaster Starcraft, and he thought, "What do you think about that?" I said, "I think it's great, man," because they've remastered plenty of other games, and like I still like Mario 3 on Nintendo. It's still a good game, and they've remade that a couple times. Why not just remake StarCraft again?
I think some of the biggest things to come out of that was them restarting their interest in esports for StarCraft. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
Like remastering is cool. Yeah, I got HD graphics. Not gonna lie, that's cool.
Sure.
But I actually think them investing in KSL and in the esports side is actually pretty big. Like the
Sure.
viewership is good.
Right. Yeah. On the English side too, even though it's mostly dominated by Koreans. As far
Yeah,
as
the
Korean
Twitch
viewership
Twitch
goes.
side of it is actually really big.
Right.
I think Africa obviously it's a little bit different in English, but with the Twitch
Just to
KSL,
clarify real fast here for the viewers, Africa, you guys are probably familiar with Africa TV, but
it's like Korean Twitch.
It's Korean Twitch, and so most Koreans watch streams on Africa TV. They don't watch stuff on Twitch. This is true for a couple different regions of the world. There's a different streaming service. China has a handful of them.
For the foreign side, it's just hard to access the Africa side.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. But my point being, yeah, when you have Twitch and we have them on the StarCraft, they do really good. It's totally worth the investment.
Right, absolutely. But when you pull the plug on these games, it's kind of scary. And I imagine they had lost a lot of money on Heroes.
Right.
Heroes has to be more expensive. Heroes events, have to be more expensive than a StarCraft event.
Yeah, 1v1. It's very different. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't imagine how much money they lost. I just didn't think they were going to.
No, I don't. I think it was
eliminated.
It was kind of irrational, in my opinion.
Well, it also signals
restructuring.
Well, not just restructuring, but also that games can die. Your game can you can be put out. Although I think there are some grassroots stuff. There's some grassroots stuff going on with Heroes, right?
Well, that's my point, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, if there's grassroots stuff going on, there's no way they couldn't have found a way to continue the esport. Let's say we take HGC and we're like, all right, we're going to make this more of a community thing now or whatever. Right. There's ways to cut it without it seeming like a cut, right? Because this kind of scares every esport in Blizzard now. Like, there are so many people. Let's count. If we counted everybody within Overwatch, within StarCraft, within Heroes, there are thousands and thousands of people. Thousands and thousands of people that require this as their jobs. Esport players, commentators.
It's kind of like when we have these factories that get shut down.
Yeah.
And then all the jobs go to a foreign country. Right. And it's like, oh, well, we've destroyed a town.
So
now.
everyone's getting scared, right?
Yeah.
Like our game, we're scared. We don't know what's going to happen. They cut one game, why not another? Overwatch, everybody. Like, all the esports employees, like, there's just so much going on right now.
So my belief was always that I call this in my head, but I call it the facelift model. Okay, so
motto.
Keep the game going, but give it a facelift.
Yeah,
every so often. Let's clean it up, and I thought they did that really well with Remastered, and they kept it very honest to what Remastered or StarCraft 1 was. Remastered is a very clear, clean update to the game. Right. It's not a different game. It's just a touched up version. That's the best model because you can't have a situation like, let's say it's baseball. Well, we only played baseball for 12 fucking years.
Right.
And then everything's about hockey now.
Yeah.
We can't play baseball now. The field isn't made of ice.
Yeah.
That always seems to be very strange to me. The idea that things have to be put to sleep or put to bed.
It's actually very weird now you think about it, because imagine there's a traditional sport that doesn't have as much following as football or whatever. We're just like, all right, we're cutting it. Like,
well, this in general is a disease, I think, within game development.
Right.
It's particularly with AAA publishers that have to answer to shareholders, is that everybody is trying to get the biggest and the best. And I've seen this happen in esports too, where people seem to think, dead game, that fucking stupid meme. This is now in every other game that's not big.
It is.
It used to be a StarCraft meme. Now it's just all over the place.
Yeah, every game that like.
Can you
falls
imagine telling Serena Williams, one of the greatest tennis players of all time, no one gives a shit
about tennis?
Because
tennis
soccer
is a dead game.
So football is so big.
Right.
Nobody plays tennis. You still play tennis?
Who even watches tennis?
Nobody watches tennis. In fact, tennis is a dead game.
Yeah.
There's no more clay courts anywhere in the world. That's a crazy concept.
It is.
Tennis is a perfectly respectable, awesome game, but I think within gaming, I don't know what it is with popularity or because this is slightly more money-driven and less legacy-driven, that you have to be the biggest or the best.
Another thing, too, to think about is a lot of the... There's an entity behind the esport, right?
Right.
There's an entity that controls the esport. Imagine if we had Tennis Corp, right? And Tennis Corp had certain amount of, like, quotas to meet, and Tennis Corp had the ability to shut down, tennis.
So this is... If we want to go big picture here, because I think a lot of people, I get asked this a lot. I don't know if you do, but people go, why are they investing in these tournaments? Not just Blizzard, all these companies.
Yeah.
Why have these tournaments? Why do this? People need to understand that within esports, you have one of the most unique things ever in that you can own a sport.
Yeah.
So imagine, for the people listening, imagine you and I invent baseball. Now, we own baseball. You can't play baseball unless you're on our baseball server. We can legally shut you down if you're not on the baseball server. By the way, we own bats. All of them. We
All the
own
merch,
balls.
yeah.
We own the gloves. We own the helmets. We own the bases. We own the television broadcast. We own the refs.
Yeah.
We own everything.
You actually
Now-
see this best for viewers is LCS.
LCS,
Like they do a
yeah,
really good
at Riot.
job of like selling kind of positions in the league.
Right.
And Overwatch obviously as well with their, league franchises.
Exactly.
Like, those are the great examples of essentially owning sports.
And this is something that you can't quite do with anything else.
Yeah.
Like, obviously FIFA has attempted to kind of control soccer. But if I go get a ball, I don't have to talk to FIFA.
Right.
If we want to go to the parking lot of my apartment complex and
We
kick
don't
a
have to pay
soccer ball,
royalties.
I don't got to pay fucking royalties. And so one of the reasons why there's this huge shift and people keep talking about esports and it's getting really big, especially since the birth of Twitch, is that this could be the biggest thing ever
Yeah.
in decades to come.
It could.
But at the same time, you have companies that'll pull out of games or pull away. And then it's... And I guess in that case, Heroes was never going to be the game that was going to make them billions.
Right. I think that's why we see a lot of
At least
people
not as an
cutting.
esport.
I think that's why we see a lot of people cutting back and pulling out. But even still, for reputations, it's probably worth it to invest the money. Like Blizzard wasn't going to
Yeah.
go broke keeping Hope Heroes going, right? Like when it comes to
I don't know.
shareholders and
I
stuff,
don't think so. I don't know. But
it would be amazing if
imagine
if I read a headline like Heroes of the Storm, breaks Blizzard's budget. Now they're going bankrupt. But they could have found ways, I think, to either A, soften the blow and be like, hey, next year we're cutting it or whatever. Like give more time. Because it was kind
Right.
of like we're done. And all the players didn't know, all the teams didn't know. They were all re-signing players.
Well, what's also strange about it as well is that, like, I hope that all these games can kind of continue to move forward, assuming that they have people that still play them.
Most of them are, too, as well.
Right.
Like, we're talking about some outliers that perhaps didn't do as well as everyone expected. But realistically, we look at esports altogether, almost everyone is moving forward.
Also, you take like RTS, right? Blizzard has that on lockdown. Now, Overwatch, I'm probably going to get some people disagreeing with me on this. Overwatch obviously is a first-person shooter, but in a lot of ways it operates as a MOBA.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a series of abilities that are what is that crazy look you're giving me? No, you don't agree, Melty?
I feel like it's more like a TF2 knockoff than anything else.
Okay, so since you're not mic'd, I'm just going to repeat what you said. Melty's the producer, by the way, guys. There's a third guy on the podcast. He hasn't talked yet. We've been eating up a lot of the oxygen in the room. So you were saying it's a TF2 type knockoff. You're correct. No, you're completely correct. It is very clear that after Blizzard got lost control of Dota and Dota 2 went to Valve, I think Blizzard looked at TF2, which maybe Valve didn't give a lot of attention to, and tried to have their own
Like a gotcha
imitation. I know I might be crazy, but that's the way I see it. 'Cause I think,
feel
fuck,
that.
we lost
But
Dota.
still, when you look at TF2 and Overwatch and you break it down to what it is, it's basically an FPS MOBA, right?
It's
like,
an FPS MOBA.
realistically
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, I think
Even Apex and all these other games that have abilities that control the way the game goes. Like you look at other people, you're controlling a hero with abilities,
Yeah.
you're controlling a shooter
I mean,
with
we
abilities.
saw this with Smite initially, where it was a MOBA, but it was first person.
Yeah.
So it operates in a way like a MOBA. I can't remember where I was going with this. I think what I was trying to get at was that. I don't know where I was going with that. I'm sorry.
I don't remember either. I don't remember.
Anyways, I feel like all these games that Blizzard has on lock, right? RTS, that genre's on lock. Keep remaking the games. Keep pushing those tournaments out there. Overwatch. I hope that Overwatch never has to go away either.
Right.
I mean, with Overwatch, you have a situation where there is so much money put in there.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see when and if it becomes profitable. But on some level, if Overwatch isn't going to be the next biggest esport of all time, it's going to be the end all. Does that mean you're supposed to kill it? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think I could reasonably see Overwatch being downgraded. Like it's clearly the biggest money investment from Blizzard by far. Like they built arenas for this game. They built infrastructure. They built studios. Like this game is obviously like they're wanting to push it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if it doesn't become the biggest thing, if it still pulls in the 200, 300K viewers, there's no reason to cut that investment, you've already invested all this infrastructure and all this stuff. You have to figure out ways to budget it down, but not to a point where it just dies, right? And it's same with Heroes, right? They invested tons of money into Heroes, and it just lost when you kill the esports completely. So there's got to be ways to just keep it going, even if it sucks and you're biting a bullet every time. But the perpetual, like, continuing the esport is worth more than killing it.
I agree.
Even if you're losing money, I still think this way.
Well, also you're essentially, when you look at like Blizzard and what they were doing with their events, the idea was that Blizzard was, at least to my understanding, was such an awesome company that made such good games. Sir, your table's right over here. Take your shoes off, have a glass of wine.
Right.
We have the best fucking game ever. And we love our game so much. We have tournaments. We produce it. We have prize pools. We love our game as much as you do.
Right.
And I think with the Heroes situation, you suddenly have not making money. And here's the thing. It's their game. I mean, it is a company. They do have a right to do that. I'm certainly not here to condemn them on that. But at the same time, for what I understand what the way that I look at esports and what the trajectory is supposed to be,
Yeah.
that seems
totally
like
feel that too.
it is a mistake. And it also
Like what
it
they
signals to other companies that, okay, now you guys can do it too.
Right.
Right.
It's just a bad way of doing the motto of like esports in general, when we're supposed to be perpetually like growing, right? All of esports, it's projected to get so big, right?
And
I
think also,
to back it up too.
I'm sorry, I did not mean to run over to you. I feel as though it might be more worth it to just have it be community funded on some level.
Yeah, totally. That's what traditional
let the
sports are.
marketplace decide.
We don't
on
have
some
a
level.
Soccer Inc. like
Right.
it is a lot of like the community. It's a lot of the sponsors. It's a lot of the people that you put in the money to run these things. Like, I feel like it should be more like this, but we're just not at that level yet. But
Yeah.
I do think we will get to that point later on. But another thing is, it's kind of gets into a weird position because the publisher will always own the rights to that esport, right? Which is what we were talking about before. We
Correct.
don't have a football being owned by a certain entity, and then you have to license that out. Whereas in esports, they do have that, right? You can't run your own league tournaments right now. You can't run your own Starcraft tournaments without going through the publishers or whatever, Overwatch, any game, Dota. Doesn't matter what game it is. The publisher owns the rights to that game now.
There's a weird history with this because originally the StarCraft tournaments in Korea, StarCraft 1, were all put on without Blizzard's permission.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a reason why Blizzard now is saying, okay, this is our shit. Okay, because there was a huge booming industry.
Yeah.
TV networks were, sometimes the number one spot would be a big StarCraft tournament on TV, and Blizzard was locked out of that.
Yeah, people were making tons of money off of this back then.
I think part of the inspiration for StarCraft 2 at Blizzard
was to make an esport.
Was we're going to make our esport now, and we're going to control it. And just to make it clear to
100%.
everybody listening, they do control. Blizzard does have control now, but it took them a long time to regain that.
I'm curious if you think that's a good or bad thing, though, at the same time.
It's really complicated. I mean,
It's really complicated. I don't expect you to have like a yes or no. Like,
I don't. I will say this is that Blizzard has continued to support StarCraft. Both
it's
1
true.
and 2.
There's a good chance StarCraft might not even be here without Blizzard support.
Right. Oh no, absolutely. I think Blizzard loves their games, and I think that it's tricky because we have all these tournaments that are organized. There's no overlap. Like when there were periods where I was casting a GSL, and there was also an IEM going on and a DreamHack going on. They've organized it and streamlined everything. I think that's excellent.
I just feel like for scalability, it's a lot less scalable when the for example, LCS and Overwatch League, those are better examples. You can't really, let's say you're like a
FPS?
football.
Oh, sorry.
Let's say you're a football or person who runs football tournaments, like huge, right? And you want to, make a competitive Overwatch League thing. You would never be able to do that because you'd be directly competing with Overwatch League, right?
Right.
And I don't know if that stunts growth in esports or not, but it's interesting to see. I think it'll keep growing though. It's not going anywhere for sure. I'm just curious if organic growth would be bigger in the long run than funded by the entity that's created the game growth. It's an interesting debate because we obviously don't know which one's right or wrong. A lot of esports will die a lot sooner, but also that might be a good thing as well because then we might see more esports coming into it. Like for example,
this is
StarCraft
so
2
complicated.
Yeah, it's really
This is
complicated.
so complicated.
Like if StarCraft 2 was never kept alive, maybe there would be another RTS right now. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know. I think we're going to be wrapping it up in a second here. How did this podcast go for you, by the way?
That was great.
Is there anything you want me to ask you?
No.
Anything you want me to ask you, or you want to ask me before we?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. I'm happy with everything we've talked about. I don't think we need to talk about anything else.
All right, man.
This is a conversation.
Yeah, man. This is fun. This is cool. These mics are fucking crazy, aren't they?
I feel like my voice sounds 100 times better in here than in real life.
Yeah.
Someone's gonna meet me in real life and be like, "What? That's
Oh
the
my
same
God.
person?"
Is that what he sounds like in real life? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. NoRegreT, Jake. Happy birthday again. Do you have anything you want to plug? Your Twitter or any shows or?
Yeah, just follow me on Twitter, Root NoRegreT, ROT NoRegreT, and Twitch is NoRegreT _. That's about it. And I play video games for a living. I also run a team house.
I didn't pick that up. That's good.
Yeah, that's about it.
All right, let's wrap it up. Let's go party for your birthday.
Sounds good.
Okay, that does it for episode 2 of the Tasteless podcast. I like that NoRegreT guy. He's a charming fella. Again, guys, please do support us on Patreon. It really does make a difference. We're hoping to make this show into something awesome. With every donation, the show's going to get a little bit better. We can take that money and pour it back in to make this more and more awesome. This show was hosted by Tasteless, produced by Melfi, artwork by Alaris, music by Mark Lentz. I've got nothing else to say, so let's wrap it up. Have a beautiful day. Bye-bye.